That's fine. That's fine. Okay, welcome everyone. I already had a dry run through, so this is going to be, just a refresher for me. Cool. Welcome everyone to FIGMA Basics. Thank you for the introduction, Cheswe. I'm sure all of you. I saw the poll results. There's a lot of beginners here. I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but I'm somewhat of the experienced user. But today we'll be focusing on some things around Figma. We're going to be teaching you how to navigate it, some useful shortcuts that I've learned over the course of the last year and a half or so. How to manage frames, how to manage components, some cool stuff with styling and layout grids as well. If these are sort of very simple concepts, so if you have experimented with Figma before, some of these things may seem quite familiar to you. But don't worry about that. Maybe we'll catch you somewhere else with something that you may not know yet. Right. Cool. Is there any questions before we begin? Take the silence as a no. Cool. All right. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is the different panels within Figma. All right. So at the top, you'll see all the arrows sort of point to a different panel located on the screen right now. At the top, we have the tools and options panel. You'll find things like the mouse tool, the frame tool, the shapes tool, pen tool, text tool, and so on and so forth. And you also find options in the corner here. I am using a desktop version on a Mac, so this may seem slightly different from the ones you're using. I'm not too sure how it looks on Windows or on the web version, but they're usually quite consistent with the way things are laid out. All right. On the right-hand side, you'll see the design and prototype panel. So this panel is useful when selecting sort of any element. You'll notice that it comes up with a bunch of options on how you can customize that particular element. You'll also notice that it is tabbed at the top here. So we have a design tab, a prototype tab, and an inspect tab. Don't worry too much about what the prototype tab and inspect tab are now. We'll deal with that sort of, as these sessions go on. But for now, the design tab is the only thing that you really need to sort of concern yourself with. And like I said before, it is sort of a place where you can customize those elements that you've selected. So you'll see things like full. Here we're able to change the text, and some of these things look quite familiar to usual text editing stuff. Yeah, and that's basically all you need to know that side. On the left-hand side, we have the layers and assets panel, which basically shows you all the layers and elements that are on your page. At the top here, you'll notice a similar design to the right-hand side with a tabbed approach between layers and assets. You'll also be able to change pages within your design file by sort of selecting the drop-down here in the corner. And you can see there's 3 pages on this particular file. Right. Cool. If there are any questions, please feel free to stop me. You can just sort of raise your hand or something like that. And I think Cheswick will just give me a heads up. All right. Cool. Some useful shortcuts that I've learned over the course of my year with Figma is the how to get around. It's quite useful. Is the Control/Command and the mouse scroll. This essentially zooms in and zooms out. Pretty similar to, I think, a lot of other software, especially, design software. The zooming and zooming out using Control and the mouse scroll. I think it's quite a common thing. Control D to duplicate. You basically Control D or Command D, and it duplicates the specific element that you've selected. It removes the whole mumbo jumbo of Control C, Control V, keeps your clipboard clean if you need it for something else, which is quite nice. We have the group layers shortcut, which, if we have 2 different layers or group 2 different elements, we can select both of them and just press Command G. It takes that whole, instead of selecting and sort of right clicking, it's a nice shortcut. And then we have Shift Command G, which is to ungroup layers. So you see we just grouped those layers, and now we've ungrouped them. And basically grouping certain things together just makes it easier to move them around. And also, you can group certain graphical elements together to create things like components, which we'll talk about a bit later on. And then the last shortcut I want to show you is to press space and click and drag. and that essentially enables you to sort of move around a bit better. I'm a personal fan of the zoom in, zoom out sort of tactic. There's also another thing that you may note. If you do have a mouse with the scrolly thingy on it, you can just click on it and it'll sort of, enable the hand tool so you get to move around a bit easier. All right, cool. So now that we've got sort of those shortcuts out of the way, those are the basic ones that you'll need sort of for the duration of this session. We're going to be working on creating a frame. For those of you who aren't too familiar with what a frame is, I want you to think about a frame as the same thing that a canvas is to an artist, a frame is to a Figma designer. All right. So how do we go about doing this? We can actually click on the little frame tool at the top left here. We're going to click on frame, and you'll notice that the right-hand side panel now populates with a list of options that we can choose from. So we have things ranging from social media, all the way up through to tablet and phone. And essentially what this does is it enables us to create a frame with sort of the dimensions that imitate what those screens would look like. Right. So for the purpose of today, we're going to be creating an iPhone 11 Pro. And we just clicked on it, and immediately you can see that specific frame popped up here on the screen. Right. Nothing too complex yet. Any questions? Like I mentioned, just raise your hand and we can deal with them. All right. Cool. So now that we have our canvas, how do we go about adding stuff to this canvas, and how do we, add things like buttons and pictures and so on and so forth? Well, we're going to be starting off with creating a basic component. For those of you who aren't sort of familiar with the term component, a component is any sort of graphical element that we're going to be using in our designs. So things like buttons, things like input fields are all components. All right. So if we boil down a button to its sort of basic elements, we can sort of see a pattern that a button is essentially a little rectangle, which we can draw out using our shape tool in the top left here, with a little bit of text in the middle, which we can also add using our text tool at the top left there. We're going to name this button. Nothing too complex. So now that we have sort of the basic building blocks of our button, we're going to make it look a bit more like a button. So the first thing we're going to do is maybe just make this text a bit smaller using our design tab on the right-hand side. Let's make it around 48. And then we're going to center this button in the middle of our rectangle. Right, we're going to either use the little visual cues that Figma gives us when things are centered, or if you are someone who likes to be very precise, we can select both of those elements, align them with their horizontal centers, and then align them to their vertical centers, and you'll see that does exactly the same thing. Right, cool. So now that we have something that sort of resembles a button, we're going to want to group these elements together. The reason being is because I don't want to have to select the entire, both of the text and the rectangle itself before moving. I just want to select any part of it. So we're going to use that shortcut we learned earlier, Command G, and we're going to group those two elements together. And now we have our button, right? But this button doesn't necessarily look very nice at the moment. It's pretty simple, basic gray button. So we're going to click on our button, and we're going to use our design panel on the right-hand side to customize how this button looks. Right, so you'll notice that our group we just created here on the left-hand side is called Group 34, and we're just going to rename this to our new button. Right, and we'll see that our new button consists of a text, which says button, and our rectangle 19, which is the rectangle surrounding that text. So we're going to keep the rectangle selected, and we're going to see over here that there is an option for full, and we're going to change the color of this button to green. Full essentially means what the color of the entire element is. For those who don't know, stroke is the outline of the element itself, and full is essentially the inside, what color it is. And then we're going to change the text of our button. We're going to change the full to a white and make it a nice little white button. Right, a nice little white text on our green button. Selecting the rectangle again, we're just going to make it look a bit nicer by adding a little bit of a curved corners to it. We zoom in a little bit more. You can see the rounded corners on the edges here. And if you're struggling to see to to understand what each of these little elements mean, you can just hover over it and it will give you some info text. So you can see this one's the corner radius. If we increase that a lot, it makes it completely circle. Cool. But for now, we're going to keep it on a corner radius of 5. Right. Now we have something that looks like a button and looks like quite a nice button, a button that we would like to click eventually. All right. So how do we make sure that these buttons and all of these graphical elements that we're using, whether it be a button or whether it be an input box, which I'm just going to create a quick demo mock-up of here. Let's just put input. How do we make sure that these specific elements are consistent throughout our design? Well, we use something called create reusable components. And what a reusable component does is essentially makes this component sort of a master, and every time you want to replicate this component in your system itself, you can basically create a copy or a child of this master component, and they're all sort of linked to this master component. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create this component first, and you'll see the instructions here on the right hand side as well. So if we select this specific component, we're going to right click on it and we're going to scroll down here to create component. And what you'll notice is that a purple outline now appears around the component that we just created. You'll see this little icon here, which means master component. And what you can actually do now is you can find this component that we just created within the assets tab of the layer and assets panel. So you'll see under FIGMA Basics, because that's the page that we're on right now, you'll see the button we just created, the new button. And we can click and drag this out onto our screen as many times as we want. So what's cool about this is that every child of this master component sort of inherits the positioning of those graphical elements relative to the master component. So what you'll notice here is that if I were to go and try and move the text around on this specific child component, you'll notice that it's basically impossible for me to do. But if I want to, for example, edit the positioning of all the text on all of the buttons within every instance of this button, I can go to the master component and move it around, and you'll see that those changes essentially transfer through to each of these child components. The only things that you can change is the color of the child component, so you can make it whatever color you'd like. Ooh. And we'll change this to a darker green. And you can also change the text on these children components, these child components, right? Fairly simple. So what this does is essentially creates a consistency throughout all the pages we design and all of these components that we use. So instead of us having to, if there was a change that needed to come in, maybe this text needed to be moved to the right somewhere, it's easier to go and change one component than to go to every screen where a button is used and change sort of the positioning on the text on each component. Ooh, we just deleted the text. So you can see we can move around the positioning as well. I'm not going to dive in too much into the details of how this works, but you can essentially change the color, and all the ones that are still the same color would change. But you can experiment with that in your sort of own time. Right. So we have now learned how to create a reusable component. I'm just going to go up here and drag our frame that we created earlier down. So we've learned how to make a reusable component. We've learned how to create a frame. How do we make sure that things are sort of, always spaced out correctly? How do we make sure we have that consistency within our system with all the design sort of screens that we make? We use things called layout grids. And what layout grids are, I'd like you to think about it as graph paper, in the same way that sort of, if you think back to high school, I know that's not a happy place, mathematics for a lot of people. If we think back to then, the same way you used to use graph paper to draw out your graphs, adding a layout grid essentially gives you a template on which you can place your graphical elements on. So what you'll see is if you click on the tab on the frame itself and you navigate here to the right hand side, you'll see a section called layout grid. I'm just going to take it away. You can click on the plus sign and it will add a grid to your screen. What you can do that's really cool is actually can customize the layout of this grid. So if you don't necessarily want to use a grid, if you want to use columns or you're more comfortable with rows, you can actually change that here. And then you can actually go into depth of how many columns you want to have, what should the spacing between the columns be. for example, a gutter, that's what it's called, and how much off the sides of the screen you want this columns to start. So I'm going to go ahead and say that we want 12 columns, and you can see that there's now 12 different white columns there. We're going to add a gutter, which is the little pink parts in the middle of 8. And we can also say how far off the sides do we want this sort of template to start. And we're going to say maybe 16 pixels off the sides. And you'll see here that, that our gutters of 8 are sort of 2 spacings off the side here, a margin of 16. Just some maths. All right. And what this essentially allows us to do is then create a consistent look and feel throughout our system. So if we go here and we grab a button for someone who has lots of designers in their team, or just wants a consistent feel throughout the entire application, we can say that all buttons should be placed, you know, off that margin. All graphical elements should be within the margins. Yeah, and it essentially gives you a more consistent feel to your designs. If any of you have experimented with the front-end framework of Bootstrap, which is a framework that developers use to create front ends, you'll notice you can actually create that layout that Bootstrap uses with 12 columns typically. Obviously that can change, and you can add on columns as you wish, but typically it is in 12 columns. So you can actually design within the same layout that the developers will use, which makes it a bit easier for them to essentially develop the products or develop the designs that you want to implement. All right, so we have learned how to make a frame. We've learned how to make a component and make that component reusable and add it to our assets tab here so we can reuse it multiple times. We've also learned how to add layout grids to specific frames so that we can create that consistent feel and basically give us template how we can arrange those components in a nice way. I'm going to ask you now to do a nice simple exercise for us, right? The exercise is really easy. It's going to be really quick. I want you to create essentially a registration screen for a company called CompuCell. Yes, it was established by me this year. It's an app that sells PC goods, so things like mouses and computer screens, etc., etc. But it's going to be a registration screen, so you won't need to worry about any of what we're selling. You will require 3 fields: the user's email, the user's password, with a little bit of a trick in there if you've ever had to enter a password for the first time, as well as the user's name. And I want you to draw inspiration from apps you use regularly. You can feel free to import any pictures or icons. You will find some assets under the exercise portion of the assets section here. So you can actually click and drag out any of the logos. There's also some icons here as well. I always say the best way to learn is through experimenting, especially when it comes to sort of this type of software. So yeah, go ahead, have fun. If you have any questions, I will send a link. I'm not sure, Ches, but how do you think we should do this? I think I can share the link here. And then you guys can join this page and then actually have access to all of these instructions as well. Before I do that, actually, is there any questions? Sorry, go ahead, Ches.
Sorry, don't worry, I'm sharing the link.
Okay, cool. Before I go ahead, before we sort of start on this specific exercise, is there any questions from anyone? Anything you want to know that I may not have covered here? I see a hand from Usama. Yes.
Sir, for this exercise, can we use simple frame or grid frame?
You can use whatever you'd like. So I'd want you preferably to do it on a mobile screen, but you can use a grid frame if you'd like. You can use columns, you can use rows. If you're talking about your layout grid, feel free to go crazy with it. As long as we have sort of a registration screen at the end, you can decide.
Sure, sir.
Cool.
Thanks.
Fantastic. No problem. All right, I see everyone's joining here. So what I'm going to do is you can create your little design anywhere on this page, as long as it obviously doesn't overlap with the content that is here. Yeah, go ahead, remember to create your frame using the frame tool, and then you can create either, preferably a mobile phone if you want. Otherwise, you can go crazy and do desktop design if you'd like as well.
So I think maybe we can just time it for about 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
So I'll just pause the recording in the meantime.
Lovely. Okay, cool. So the first thing that I did, although if some of you are watching, you may see that I cheated a little bit, but I set up my grids. So just give me the spacing and the margins I need, and you'll notice that all my elements are sort of lined up within this grid itself. Then I went ahead and I pulled in some of the elements from some of the assets from the side panel here. With regards to CompuCell, so I pulled in the logo itself, and I pulled in the icons. Then I went ahead and I made some components here. So you'll notice that I have my master component for my text fields or my input fields, and then I have my master component for my button. All of these things are linked, so that if I do ever want to change sort of the color of the outlines itself, I can do so in one place, and it just sort of translates through. Ooh. Let's not do that. Cool. Yeah, and then I just, I try to spruce it up as much as I could within this short time. Just, added some color in some places. You'll see the colors are a bit weird because I hit this confirm button where it should be something like that. But yeah, it's very simple. I don't know if any of you caught on with the password thing. When you're signing up for something, they ask you to confirm your password. We'll take a look at some of your designs now. That was sort of the one sneaky thing that I did, but apart from that, yeah, relatively simple. I don't know if yeah, so it's essentially, sorry, what I did was I just sort of used all the tools that we spoke about and just made it a bit easier to design. Yeah. Any volunteers on who wants to go next? You can put it in the chat if you'd like. If you're not comfortable, that's okay as well.
Cool. I think it's Osama who would like to go. I think that's it.
Osama. Oh, okay, cool. Osama, you want to go? Just direct me to your design. I don't know which one is yours. Ah, I see you. I see you. Okay, lovely.
Mine.
Lovely stuff. Oh, okay, nice. Okay, you can talk us through it. Osama, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Give me 1 minute.
Sure, no problem. No problem.
My design. So how is that?
It looks good. I see you made use of the layout grid, which is always a good practice to have. Did you make use of any of the component styling or? Unfortunately. Okay, cool. I see you made use of a button. Nice.
I am new to the design, so I didn't know and too much about design. Is some of my basic design.
No, that's fine. I mean, it looks good. It gets the job done. I see you made use of pulling in a button from the left-hand side here with regards to the register button, which is quite good.
And I think it's also quite commendable that you've used labels on the top of your input fields. So that's also quite good. So well done on that, Osama.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
It's always good practice to label your field, and you group the elements together. Very, very good. Very, very good.
Thank you.
Nice one. That's
all from my side. Thank you.
Cool. Perfect. Anyone else wants to have a go at it? Cool. Alexandra, I think yours is up here, if I'm not mistaken.
Hi. Can you guys hear me?
Hi, Alexandra. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Hey.
Directly
I'm like
where?
the top, Zoom, yes, that one. That's me. Cool. So this is my first ever time using Figma, but it's been really intuitive. I mean, I'm used to using like a lot of the Adobe products, like Illustrator and stuff. So it's actually quite similar, I think, just having known that. So yeah, I made use of the components for the different input lines, just to be able to copy those. And yeah, I tried to use the grid, but I wasn't sure how you got those vertical lines because mine just came up as like a cross hatch kind of thing. So I wasn't sure how you got that.
I see. All right, cool. Let me give you a quick demo. So once you have your layout grid sort of here on the, when you sort of select the frame, you can click on layout grid settings.
Yeah.
Then you can come over here and choose.
I see.
Columns.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you can actually customize the gutter, the margin, and the count as well.
Okay, super.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, good job. I mean, for I've also I use a little bit of the Adobe products, and it's quite intuitive. I think, if not a little bit more so than the Adobe,
yeah,
or a first-time user, especially, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, it's great.
It's quite good. Well done. It looks rather good. I see also you have your components set out quite nicely. Great job.
Cool, thank you.
Lovely. All right. Should we take one more? Or we can actually, I mean, there's only 2 people left. You guys want to have a go? If you don't, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Jenny and
I can go if you want.
Do you want?
If you want.
Go for it. Go for it.
So I made use of all the components to make the little text things. That's a button as well. And then I made use of the icons and the assets as well.
Lovely stuff. And I like this cool little, did you use the pen tool for this?
I did. I attempted the pen tool.
Nice. For those of you who haven't used the pen tool before, the pen tool basically allows you to create more complex shapes, polygons, and then you can see we just created one there, and then you can actually fill it. So what Jenny did here, she created this cool shape and she filled it with a little bit of a gray fill, and it gives this nice effect across the screen. If I just hide the grid. Well done. This looks really, really nice, Jenny.
Thanks.
Lovely. Okay. Last person. Karista, do you want to have a go at it?
Hi, sorry, can you guys hear me?
Very likely. Yes.
Okay, sorry, I don't have any earbuds on.
Oh, I think we've lost you again.
You sound so fun.
Oh, you sound really.
Can you come in closer to your microphone? I think. Not sure if it's the mic. Krista?
Oh, I think.
I think she's having audio problems. Maybe you can type it, Krista?
Yeah, you type it, I'll read it out. I see you made use of components here for the fields. You brought in some of the assets.
Okay, cool. I think she's going to type it. Yeah, I think everybody did a really good job for the first round. I think this is going to be so exciting to see how everybody progresses as we go along. There's so many cool things we can learn about when it comes to design. And I'm looking forward to watching everybody grow together.
Yeah, very exciting.
So, I think, I don't know what you think about timing, Tameem, but oh, there we go. Karista says, sorry, it's quite basic, but I was trying to download PNGs of symbols from Google Material Design to insert the little I for the password visibility. Oh, okay. I can see what you mean.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so you were looking for the icon for email and for password and for visibility. Okay, I see that. Awesome. That is good thinking. I think what we can do for the next session is maybe we can show how we can import different icons and symbols into Figma. I think that would be a nice one.